You cheated on me with my sister, so I married your brother and cut you out of the will. That's the highlight reel anyway. The Cliff's Notes version of the most spectacular implosion of my life, and the equally spectacular resurrection that followed. But let me back up because trust me, this whole messed up story deserves the full cinematic treatment. There's something almost beautiful about the moment before your life falls apart. That last breath of ignorant bliss. For me, it was a random Tuesday, the kind where nothing special was supposed to happen. I was coming home early, armed with takeout from that Thai place Marcus loved, and concert tickets I'd splurged on for our anniversary. 5 years together, 3 of them married, and I still got that flutter in my stomach when I thought about surprising him. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I remember setting the food down on the kitchen counter, noticing Marcus's keys were there. He was home early too. Coincidence, I thought. Serendipity. God, I was such an idiot. I heard it before I saw anything. A soft, muffled sound from upstairs. Our bedroom. My brain immediately offered the most innocent explanation. Marcus was napping. Or watching something on his laptop with headphones. My brain is nice like that, always trying to protect me from the obvious. I took the stairs 2 at a time, excited to share my surprise. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of afternoon light to escape into the hallway. Just enough for me to see a tangle of limbs on our bed before my brain could catch up with my eyes. Time does this weird thing when your world collapses. It stretches and warps. Those few seconds of realization felt like hours, as my mind frantically tried to reassemble what I was seeing into something that wouldn't destroy me. Dark hair splayed across my pillowcase. Her face turned away from me, but I didn't need to see it. I'd know my sister's tattoo anywhere. That stupid little infinity symbol on her shoulder blade that she got on her 21st birthday. The one I'd held her hand for when she was scared of the needle. And Marcus, my husband. His back to the door, his hands where they had no right to be. The Thai food went cold downstairs. The concert happened without us, and something inside me froze over while I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. All those movie scenes where the wronged wife bursts in shrieking and clawing, that wasn't me. Instead, I quietly closed the door and walked back downstairs, my body on autopilot while my mind shut down completely. I sat in my car for 3 hours, keys in the ignition, going nowhere. Just watching the sun slide down the sky until our driveway was bathed in shadows. At some point I saw Victoria's car, which she must have parked around the corner, pull out and drive away. My little sister, my only sibling, the person who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms because she was scared. The numbness was a mercy. It let me function mechanically, driving to a hotel, checking in, ordering room service I couldn't eat. It even let me respond to Marcus's increasingly frantic texts with a simple, working late, staying at Jen's, lie that bought me time. Time for what? I didn't know yet. My body was just moving ahead of my brain, which was still stuck in that doorway, looking at the wreckage of my marriage. The pain hit around 3 a.m., not in waves, but all at once like a building demolition. 1 minute I was staring at the hotel ceiling, and the next I was curled into myself, making sounds I didn't recognize as human. It felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and was slowly crushing everything inside. I couldn't breathe through it, couldn't think through it. I've never been a crier. Not when I broke my arm in 3rd grade, not at my parents' funeral 5 years ago. But that night, I cried until I was empty, until my eyes were swollen shut and my throat was raw, until the hotel pillowcase was soaked through and I had to flip it over. Morning came anyway, indifferent to my collapse. The sun rose like it was any other day. My phone showed 8 missed calls from Marcus, 3 from Victoria. I turned it off completely. What follows betrayal isn't just heartbreak, it's disorientation. The entire narrative of your life suddenly reads like fiction. Those anniversary dinners, the family holidays, the whispered promises in the dark. Was any of it real? How long had they been laughing at me? The questions piled up, each one sharper than the last. I spent 3 days in that hotel room. 3 days of room service trays piling up, of staring at the wall, of replaying every interaction with Marcus and Victoria for the past... how long? A month? A year? Had there been signs I'd missed? Glances I'd overlooked? On the 4th day, I showered. Put on the clothes I'd bought from the hotel gift shop. And I went home. Marcus was waiting, of course. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, looking appropriately wrecked. He started talking the moment I walked in, a jumble of apologies and explanations that sounded rehearsed. It only happened once. He'd been drinking. It was a mistake. He loved me, not her. The oldest script in the world. I let him talk himself empty while I stood there, oddly calm. It's fascinating how clarity can come in the strangest moments. As he spoke, all I could see was how his mouth formed the same shape when he lied as when he told me he loved me for the first time. The same earnest eyes, the same pleading hands. Had he been acting then too? Victoria came by to check on me, I heard him saying, as if my sister dropping by our house while I was at work was the most natural thing in the world. We were just talking about you, actually. About your parents and how the anniversary of their death was coming up. Something in me snapped at that, using my dead parents as cover for whatever they'd been doing. My voice, when I finally used it, didn't sound like my own. How thoughtful of you both. Honoring my parents' memory by fucking on their anniversary. He flinched at that. Good. The next few hours blur together in my memory. There was shouting, mostly him. Crying, again him. Begging, bargaining. The full display of desperation. I just stood there, a glacier, watching him break himself against my silence. It didn't mean anything, he kept saying, as if that made it better instead of worse. When he finally exhausted himself, I told him I needed time, space. He could stay with his brother for a while. I knew Martin would take him in. They'd always been close, those two. Different as night and day, but bound by that unshakable brotherhood. Marcus the charming risk-taker, Martin the steady, responsible one who always cleaned up his younger brother's messes. Marcus agreed too quickly, relieved that I wasn't throwing him out permanently. He packed a bag while I sat in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Before he left, he knelt in front of me, took my hands in his. "We can fix this," he said with that confidence that had once charmed me. "We're stronger than this." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Not yet ready to tell him that whatever we were, it had already died in that bedroom 4 days ago. After he left, the house felt both too empty and too full of ghosts. Every room held memories now tainted. The couch where we'd curled up watching movies. The kitchen where he'd taught me to make pasta from scratch. The shower where, well, I changed the sheets first, then the entire bedroom set. Then I called a realtor. Victoria tried to see me, showed up at the house 3 times before she got the message. Left tear-stained voicemails about how sorry she was, how it had been a terrible mistake, how she'd been in a bad place since her breakup with what's-his-name. Each message made me colder, harder, more resolved. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your heart. It rewires your entire system. I stopped crying, stopped feeling much of anything except a low, steady hum of something new, something with teeth. 2 weeks after D-Day, I finally answered one of Marcus's calls. "I think we should try counseling," I told him, my voice carefully modulated. "But I need more time first." The relief in his voice was palpable. He'd been afraid I'd already contacted a divorce lawyer. Little did he know I'd already met with 3. "Whatever you need," he promised. "I'll wait as long as it takes." I thought about the way he hadn't waited for me on that Tuesday afternoon, about how little his promises were worth now. "Thank you," I said anyway, because the plan forming in my mind required his hope. Required him to believe there was something left to save. That night, I found myself driving by Martin's condo. Not intentionally. At least, that's what I told myself. I'd just been driving aimlessly, trying to outrun my thoughts, and somehow ended up on his street. The lights were on. 2 silhouettes visible through the blinds. Brothers consoling each other, no doubt. Martin listening patiently while Marcus justified his actions, minimized his betrayal. I drove past without stopping, but the next night I found myself there again. And the night after that. On the 4th night, I parked, sat there for 20 minutes, engine off, wondering what the hell I was doing. I was about to restart the car when Martin emerged from the building, gym bag slung over his shoulder. Alone. Our eyes met as he approached his car. His step faltered. I saw recognition, then wariness, then something like resignation cross his face. He changed direction, heading toward me instead. I rolled down my window as he approached. We hadn't been close, Martin and I. Cordial at family gatherings, occasional dinners where he was unfailingly polite but always slightly reserved. The responsible brother who worked 60-hour weeks at the family's investment firm, who showed up at every holiday with expensive wines but no date, who watched Marcus's charmed life with an expression I'd never quite been able to read. "He's not here," Martin said, leaning slightly toward my open window. "He's at some work thing." "I wasn't looking for him," I answered truthfully. Martin studied me for a long moment, his eyes, darker than Marcus's, more guarded, taking in my appearance. I hadn't been sleeping well, hadn't been eating much either. "You look like you could use a drink," he finally said. I should have said no. should have driven away. But something about the simple, straightforward offer broke through my numbness. I really could. That was the moment, though I didn't know it then. The fulcrum point where grief began its slow transformation into something else. Something with purpose. With direction. We went to a quiet bar a few blocks away, sat in a corner booth and ordered whiskeys neither of us seemed particularly interested in drinking. The silence between us should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was restful. Two people with no energy for pretense. "I'm sorry," he said eventually. Just that. No excuses for his brother. No platitudes about time healing all wounds. Just a simple acknowledgement of my pain. "Are you?" I asked, because I genuinely wanted to know. "Sorry it happened or sorry I found out?" His laugh was short, humorless. "Both, I suppose. But mostly that it happened at all." He twisted his glass slowly. "Marcus has always been Marcus. But this was beyond the pale even for him." "And Victoria?" I couldn't help asking. "What's the family verdict there?" Martin's expression hardened slightly. "I've never particularly cared for your sister." It was such an understated reaction to what she'd done that I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks. A rusty, broken sound, but genuine. "That makes two of us." We didn't talk much after that. Just sat together in the dim light, two people connected by the same betrayal from opposite sides. When we finally left, he walked me to my car, stood there awkwardly for a moment before saying, "If you need anything..." "I won't," I cut him off. Then, softening, "But thank you." I drove home feeling something other than numb for the first time in weeks. Not healed. Not even close. But awake. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the first threads of a plan began to weave themselves together in my mind. A plan that would take time, patience, perfect execution. A plan that started with making Marcus believe he still had a chance. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in compartmentalization. By day, I was the wounded but healing wife, taking tentative steps toward reconciliation, agreeing to couples therapy, listening to Marcus's endless promises with carefully measured hope. By night, I was architecting his downfall with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that would make a military strategist proud. The first phase of my plan was simple: information gathering. Knowledge is power, and I needed every scrap I could get. I started with our finances. Marcus had always handled the money in our relationship, not because I couldn't. I have an MBA and worked in corporate finance for years before starting my own consulting business, but because he'd insisted. "You're too busy building your company," he'd said. "Let me take care of this," and like a trusting idiot, I'd let him. 3 hours into scouring our financial records, I understood why he'd been so insistent. The man had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for years. Small amounts at first, growing bolder over time. Thousands of dollars transferred to an account I'd never seen before. Property investments in his name only. A safety net he'd been building while I believed we were building a life together. The real kicker? A significant portion of his business trips over the past 2 years had been funded by my money. Trips that now, reviewing the credit card statements with newly clear eyes, showed hotel charges for 2, dinners with wine pairings, spa services. How many of those trips had included Victoria? The question burned like acid. I printed everything, organized it chronologically, and locked it in a safe deposit box at a bank Marcus didn't know I used. Evidence. Phase 2 required a different kind of intelligence, emotional reconnaissance. I needed to understand the terrain of Marcus's mind, his hopes, his fears, his blind spots. This meant re-engaging, pretending that I was cautiously warming to the idea of reconciliation. God, the acting I did during those months deserves an Oscar. I sat across from him at carefully chosen restaurants, public places always. I couldn't stomach being alone with him, nodding at appropriate intervals as he spun tales of remorse and promised change. I learned to produce tears on command, to let my voice catch when speaking of our future, to reach across the table and touch his hand in apparent forgiveness. Each touch made my skin crawl. Each false smile hardened my resolve. Martin unknowingly became my refuge during this time. An unexpected development, but a logical one in retrospect. He was the only person in my life who knew exactly what Marcus was capable of, who required no explanations when I occasionally needed to vent. Our meetings were irregular but increasingly necessary for my sanity. Drinks after particularly draining therapy sessions, coffee when I happened to be in his neighborhood. He never pushed, never pried. Just offered that steady, quiet presence that acted like a balm on my raw nerves. Sometimes we hardly spoke at all. Other times I found myself telling him things I'd never told anyone, about my parents, about the business I was building, about the dreams I'd put on hold for Marcus without even realizing it. "You deserve better," he said once, after I'd explained how Marcus had talked me out of expanding my business internationally last year, claiming it would put too much strain on our marriage. The simple statement, delivered without dramatic emphasis, hit me like a thunderbolt. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in me without qualification. "So do you," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure what I meant by it. A flicker of something passed behind his eyes. "We're not talking about me. Maybe we should be." The moment hung between us, charged with something I wasn't ready to examine. I changed the subject. Meanwhile, Victoria had moved from tearful voicemails to desperate texts. I still wasn't speaking to her, but I monitored her digital pleas with clinical detachment, watching for useful information. The story emerged in fragments. Their affair had lasted 8 months, not the one-time mistake Marcus had claimed. She thought he was going to leave me for her. He'd promised as much, apparently. 8 months. While I was planning our anniversary surprise, while I was nursing her through that flu last winter, while we were all smiling through Christmas dinner at my house. 8 months of coordinated betrayal. The knowledge should have destroyed me. Instead, it crystallized my determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Phase 3 of my plan required the most delicate touch, creating distance between Marcus and his family's money. The Wilcox fortune was substantial, old manufacturing money transformed into smart investments over 3 generations. Marcus had always been a bit smug about his trust fund, about the safety net that meant he could take risks in his own investment ventures without real consequences. His father, Howard Wilcox, had never fully approved of Marcus's more impulsive business decisions or his lifestyle choices. But blood was blood, and Marcus remained in line to inherit a significant portion of the family wealth along with his brother. Howard was a traditionalist to his core, family values, loyalty, the whole package wrapped in Brooks Brothers suits and country club memberships. The kind of man who would be horrified by a son who cheated on his wife, with her sister no less. But I wasn't about to play the scorned wife card directly. Too obvious. Too likely to trigger familial closing of ranks. This required subtlety. I'd always gotten along with Howard and Eleanor, Marcus's mother. They appreciated my work ethic, my lack of interest in their money. Eleanor and I shared a passion for gardening. Howard respected my business acumen. I'd maintained a polite distance since the separation, exchanging the occasional text with Eleanor but nothing more. It was time to nurture those relationships. Not with any hint of manipulation, but with genuine connection that just happened to give me proximity. I invited Eleanor to a garden show I knew she'd been wanting to attend, accepted Howard's long-standing offer to review some investment opportunities for one of his charitable foundations, small steps back into their orbit that felt natural, not calculated. "Marcus mentioned you two are working things out," Eleanor said carefully as we wandered among displays of hybrid roses. "He seems hopeful." "We're trying," I said, allowing my voice to catch slightly. "Some days are harder than others." "I can imagine," she murmured, patting my hand. "But marriage takes work. Howard and I had our rough patches too." I rather doubted Howard had ever slept with her sister, but I kept that thought to myself. "Marcus is lucky to have such understanding parents," I said instead. "The way you raised him, raised both your boys, with such strong values. It's what drew me to him in the first place." Eleanor practically glowed at the compliment. People believe what they want to believe, and Eleanor wanted to believe her son was salvageable, that his moral compass would ultimately right itself because she'd installed it. Howard was more pragmatic. During our lunch meeting about the foundation's investments, he studied me with shrewd eyes that had evaluated thousands of business deals. "You're different," he said finally, after we'd concluded our actual business. "Am I?" "Sharper, more focused." He tapped his pen against his legal pad. "It suits you." I smiled, letting a hint of steel show through. "Clarity can be a gift, even when it comes wrapped in pain." He nodded slowly. "Marcus doesn't deserve a second chance." The blunt statement surprised me. I'd underestimated Howard's perception. "That's not for me to say," I demurred. "No, it's for me to say." And I just did. He leaned back in his chair. "But you're giving him one anyway. Why?" The question hung between us, a test I hadn't anticipated. I could have lied, spun some story about enduring love. Instead, I met his gaze steadily. "Because 20 years of marriage taught me something, Howard. Sometimes the long game is the only one worth playing." A slow smile spread across his face. Not warm, but appreciative. Indeed. We left it at that, but something had shifted. A mutual recognition, a silent alliance. I left with the distinct impression that Howard Wilcox wouldn't be particularly surprised by whatever happened next. All the while, my relationship with Martin evolved in ways I hadn't planned for. What had started as occasional drinks became regular dinners, conversations that stretched late into the night, a friendship built on shared understanding and, increasingly, genuine enjoyment of each other's company. He was nothing like his brother. Where Marcus was all surface charm and quick intensity, Martin was depth and steady warmth. Marcus commanded attention when he entered a room. Martin earned it through what he actually had to say. I found myself looking forward to our meetings, planning topics I wanted to discuss with him, thinking of books or articles he might enjoy. "You'd have made a good chess player," he remarked one evening as we lingered over dessert. "What makes you say that? You're patient, strategic." His eyes, warm in the restaurant's dim lighting, held mine. "You see 10 moves ahead while most people are still deciding whether to move their pawn." I raised an eyebrow. "Are we playing chess, Martin? Aren't we all in one way or another?" He smiled slightly. "The question is who's on which side of the board." The comment hit closer to home than he could have known. Or perhaps he knew exactly how close he was coming to the truth. Martin had always been perceptive. 4 months into my plan, Marcus suggested we try a weekend away together. Neutral territory, he called it, a fresh start. I agreed with just the right amount of hesitation. The trip would provide an opportunity for Phase 4, emotional manipulation. Time to let Marcus believe he was winning me back, that his campaign of contrition was bearing fruit. The more invested he became in our reconciliation, the harder the eventual fall. The weekend was an exercise in controlled revulsion. Every touch, every conversation required me to suppress my instinct to recoil. I let him hold my hand at dinner. Let him kiss me goodnight, though I made sure we had separate rooms. Taking it slow, I explained with downcast eyes that suggested shy hope rather than barely contained disgust. On the second night, after enough wine to make my performance convincing, I asked the question I'd been holding back. "Why Victoria?" Marcus froze mid-sip, clearly unprepared despite the inevitability of this conversation. He set his glass down carefully. "It wasn't about her," he said finally. "It could have been anyone." The honesty, however unintentional, was breathtaking in its cruelty. It could have been anyone. My sister wasn't special, just convenient. Then why anyone at all? I pressed, eyes wide with practiced vulnerability. Was I not enough? The question triggered exactly the response I'd predicted. A flood of reassurances, promises that I was more than enough, that he'd been selfish and stupid, that he'd nearly ruined the best thing in his life. "You are everything to me," he insisted, reaching for my hands across the table. "The life we've built together, it's all I want. All I've ever wanted." I let a tear slip down my cheek, watched him respond to it like a fish to bait. This moment, his belief that he was breaking through my defenses, winning me back, this was the foundation upon which I would build his destruction. "I want to believe that," I whispered. "Then believe it," he urged, squeezing my hands. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you." I smiled tremulously. "I'm trying." Later, alone in my hotel room, I showered for 45 minutes, scrubbing away the feeling of his hands on mine. Then I called Martin. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "About as expected," I said, sinking onto the bed. "He's convinced he's making progress." "And are you okay?" The simple question, focused on my well-being rather than the plan's progress, caught me off guard. Was I okay? I honestly didn't know anymore. The anger that had sustained me was evolving into something colder, more focused. Not healing, I was under no illusions about that, but perhaps a different kind of functional. "I'm surviving," I answered truthfully. "One day at a time. That's all any of us can do," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, "I miss you." 3 simple words, but they landed like a physical touch. Warm, unexpected, complicated. "I miss you too," I replied, surprising myself with how true it was. When I returned from the weekend, I moved into the final preparation stage of my plan. The pieces were nearly in position, but timing would be everything. I needed a catalyst, a perfect moment to set everything in motion. It arrived in the form of Victoria showing up unannounced at my office. 6 months of silence between us, and suddenly there she was, standing awkwardly by my assistant's desk when I returned from lunch. 5 minutes, she pleaded when I turned to walk back out. "Please." Curiosity won out over anger. I nodded toward my office, closed the door behind us. "What do you want, Victoria?" She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Good. I need to know if you're really taking him back," she said without preamble. "Because if you are," she swallowed hard. "If you are, I'll stay away. Completely. Move to Seattle like Mom always wanted. Start fresh." I studied her, trying to see the sister I'd grown up with, the girl I'd protected from playground bullies and taught to drive. All I saw was the woman who'd slept with my husband in my bed. "And if I'm not?" Hope flashed across her face before she could suppress it. "Then I think you should know everything. Not just about us, but about the others. Others. Plural." The word hit like a physical blow, though I maintained my neutral expression. "There was a woman in Phoenix last year," she continued when I didn't respond. "Someone from his Chicago office before that. She looked down at her hands. "He has a pattern, and I was stupid enough to think I was different." The information wasn't entirely surprising. I'd suspected as much from the financial records, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of disgust through me. Not jealousy, not even anger anymore, just a bone-deep revulsion at having wasted so much of my life on such a hollow man. "Why are you telling me this now?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Self-preservation? Conscience? Take your pick." She met my eyes directly for the first time. "He told me 2 days ago that it's really over between us, that he's committed to making things work with you. And that hurt your feelings," I observed coldly. "It opened my eyes," she countered. "Made me see what he's been doing to both of us." I almost pitied her then. Almost. "Thank you for the information," I said, standing to indicate our conversation was over. "I'll take it under advisement, Anne." She stood too, reaching toward me before thinking better of it and dropping her hand. "I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect that. But please don't go back to him. You deserve so much better." The exact words Martin had used. Coming from her, they rang hollow. "Goodbye, Victoria." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, perfectly still. The final pieces of my plan slotted into place in my mind. The catalyst had arrived. It was time to make my move. That evening, I called Martin. "Remember when you said chess is about knowing which side of the board you're on?" I asked without preamble when he answered. "I remember. I need to know which side you're on, Martin. Once and for all." His response was immediate, unhesitating. "Yours." "I'm on your side, Anne. I thought you knew that." I closed my eyes, suddenly certain of what I needed to do next. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night. There's something I need to ask you." The board was set, the players positioned, and I was finally ready to make the move that would change everything. The restaurant I chose for dinner with Martin wasn't our usual casual spot. This was calculated. Elegant lighting, private booths, the kind of place where people celebrate milestones or make life-altering decisions. Martin noticed immediately, his eyebrow rising slightly as the host led us to a secluded corner. "Special occasion?" he asked once we were seated, his tone light but eyes watchful. I took a breath, centered myself. This moment mattered more than he knew. "I hope so," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm about to ask you something unorthodox." His expression gave nothing away, but I noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the careful way he placed his napkin across his lap. Martin had always been the contained brother, emotions kept under tight regulation. But I'd learned to read him these past months. "I'm listening," he said simply. I'd rehearsed this speech a dozen different ways, but in the moment, direct honesty felt right. "I want to marry you." The words hung between us, bold and impossible to misinterpret. To his credit, Martin didn't laugh or recoil. He just went very still, his eyes never leaving mine as he processed what I'd said. "That wasn't a question," he finally responded, voice steady. "Will you marry me then?" I amended, a nervous laugh escaping despite my best efforts. "Does that work better grammatically?" "Anne. Just my name, but loaded with complexity." "You're still legally married to my brother, a technicality I'm addressing next week." I leaned forward, voice dropping. "This isn't a rebound, Martin. It's not emotional confusion or misplaced feelings." "Then what is it?" he asked, genuinely curious rather than judgmental. I considered lying, crafting some romantic narrative about feelings that had grown organically, but the foundation of whatever this was between us had always been honesty. "It's multiple things," I admitted. "Some pure, some less so." I took a sip of water, gathering thoughts. "I care about you. That's real. These months getting to know you, really know you, have meant more than I can express." He waited, sensing there was more. "But it's also strategic," I continued. There's a chessboard here and I'm making my move. Against Marcus. Yes. And my family? I hesitated, then nodded once. Your father specifically. Martin's laugh surprised me. Short, genuinely amused, with no edge of offense. I've been waiting to see what you were planning, he confessed, relaxing slightly. I knew there was something. You're too smart to simply take Marcus back. And how do you feel about being part of that plan? I asked, because his answer mattered more than I'd anticipated when crafting this strategy. He considered the question seriously, turning his water glass slowly between long fingers. First, I should tell you that my father has terminal cancer. The statement blindsided me. What? Pancreatic. Stage 4. He's known for about 3 months. The family announcement is scheduled for next week, once he finalizes some business arrangements. I sat back, momentarily thrown. This changed timelines, variables. I'm sorry, Martin. I didn't know. How could you? His smile was sad. He's being very Howard about it. Practical, unsentimental, focused on the legacy. How long? 6 months. Maybe less. He shrugged slightly. The will is being rewritten as we speak. Understanding dawned. That's why you wanted to know if I was on your side of the board. Partly, he acknowledged. Though I meant what I said, I am on your side, regardless of what you decide to do. The waiter appeared, and we ordered mechanically, both preoccupied with recalculating scenarios based on this new information. When we were alone again, Martin leaned forward. To answer your question about how I feel being part of your plan, it depends on the plan. His gaze was direct, challenging. What exactly are you proposing, Anne? This was it. The moment of truth. Laying out my strategy meant trusting Martin completely, making him a true partner rather than a convenient piece on my board. The risk was substantial, but so was the potential payoff. I want to make sure Marcus gets nothing from your father's will, I said bluntly. No trust fund, no company shares, no property. I want him cut off completely. Martin didn't seem surprised. And you think marrying me accomplishes that? I think Howard respects you, listens to you, and I think he's already displeased with Marcus's behavior. I twisted my wedding ring, a habit I'd developed since the separation. A divorce would be a private matter. A scandal might remain contained. But if his disgraced brother married his ex-wife immediately after, that becomes a public humiliation. Martin finished. The kind of messy family drama Howard has always despised. Exactly. Your father values loyalty above almost everything else. Marcus's betrayal of me was bad enough. But for his brother to choose me over family solidarity? That forces Howard to take sides. And you're betting he chooses me. I nodded. The responsible son? The one who's always cleaned up after Marcus? The one who actually cares about the family legacy? Martin was quiet for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not the contained, polite smile I was used to, but something with heat behind it. You know what's extraordinary? He said finally. I've been in love with you for years, and somehow you've managed to propose a marriage of convenience that also happens to be everything I've wanted. The confession sent a shock through me. Years? He must have read my surprise because he laughed softly. From the moment Marcus introduced us, he confirmed. Why do you think I kept my distance? Why I was always so reserved at family gatherings? Memories rearranged themselves in my mind. Martin's quiet attentiveness, the thoughtful birthday gifts that always somehow matched my interests perfectly, the way he'd listen intently whenever I spoke at family dinners. You never said anything, I whispered. He was my brother, Martin said simply. And you loved him. The waiter brought our appetizers, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. I used the time to process this revelation, to examine my own feelings about Martin with fresh perspective. Had there always been something there that I'd overlooked? The ease between us these past months hadn't come from nowhere. So that's a yes then? I asked after the waiter departed. To my unorthodox proposal? Martin raised his glass. It's a yes. To taking down my philandering brother, to helping you get the justice you deserve. His eyes held mine, and to finally having the chance to show you what a real partnership looks like. We clinked glasses, an unlikely engagement celebration. Two strategic allies with complicated motivations, and perhaps the beginnings of something genuine between us. There's one more thing, I said, setting my glass down. I need to know everything about the family finances, particularly Marcus's access points. Martin nodded, unsurprised. Ready when you are. He hesitated, then added, And Victoria? What happens to her in this scenario? I'd given my sister considerable thought. The rage had cooled enough for clearer analysis. Victoria punishes herself more effectively than I ever could, I said. She's collateral damage, not a primary target. Besides, I added with a cold smile, watching Marcus lose everything will hurt her worse than anything I could devise specifically for her. The rest of dinner passed in quiet strategy session, Martin revealing details about family holdings, trust structures, and the internal dynamics of Wilcox Investments. He was thorough, detached despite discussing his own inheritance, like we were planning a corporate merger rather than a family coup. "How soon can you file for divorce?" he asked as we finished our dessert. "Papers are ready. I can submit them tomorrow?" He nodded thoughtfully. "Perfect timing with my father's announcement next week. The family will be gathered anyway." His mouth curved slightly. Might as well maximize the drama. As he drove me home, a comfortable silence settled between us, broken only when he pulled up to my driveway. "I should warn you," he said, turning to face me. "I may have agreed to a marriage based partly on strategic revenge, but I intend to be an actual husband, Anne." The quiet intensity in his voice triggered an unexpected flutter in my chest. "I'm still healing," I reminded him. "I know." He reached across the console, his hand hovering near mine without touching. "I've waited years. I can wait longer?" I surprised myself by taking his hand, squeezing once before letting go. "Thank you for everything." "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow?" I confirmed. "We have a wedding to plan." The next 7 days unfolded with military precision. I filed for divorce, requesting an expedited process based on irreconcilable differences and Marcus's documented infidelity. Marcus called 17 times after being served, each voicemail more desperate than the last. "We can work through this," he insisted, voice cracking. What happened to trying again? To our weekend away? I let him spiral, his panic feeding my resolve. Meanwhile, Martin and I executed Phase 1 of our newly refined plan, strategic information leaks within the Wilcox family circle. "Had lunch with Eleanor today?" Martin reported during our daily check-in. "Mentioned casually how much time you and I have been spending together. She's suspicious but trying not to show it." "Good," I nodded. "What about the trust restructuring?" "Meeting with the family lawyers tomorrow. Dad's bringing both of us in to discuss the changes." I felt a twinge of sympathy for Martin, navigating his father's mortality alongside our scheme. "How are you holding up with all of that?" His surprise at the question was visible but quickly masked. "I'm compartmentalizing," he admitted. "Grief later. Strategy now." I understood that approach all too well. 4 days before Howard's planned family gathering, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced. I'd been expecting this, the direct confrontation when other approaches failed. I buzzed him in, steeling myself. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled. The Marcus of old would never have allowed himself to be seen this way. His dishevelment was either genuine distress or calculated theater. With Marcus, it was always hard to tell where performance ended and reality began. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded as soon as I opened the door. "We were making progress? You said you were willing to try." I stepped aside, letting him enter but maintaining distance between us. "I changed my mind." "Just like that? Without even talking to me first? The way you talked to me before sleeping with my sister?" I countered, voice even. He flinched. "That's not fair." No, it wasn't. I moved to the kitchen, putting the island between us. Clinical detachment was easier with a physical barrier, but neither was funneling our money into your private accounts for years. His expression shifted from hurt to wariness. "What are you talking about?" "The Phoenix woman. The Chicago woman." I ticked them off on my fingers. "The apartment in the Cayman Islands that I'm guessing was for whoever came next." Color drained from his face. "Victoria," he breathed. "She told you." "She told me enough," I agreed. I found the rest myself. Marcus sank onto a bar stool, the performance of righteous indignation collapsing into calculation. I could almost see him reassessing, looking for new angles of attack or defense. "I made mistakes," he said finally, voice lowered to the intimate register that had once made my heart race. Terrible, unforgivable mistakes. But throwing away 5 years of marriage— 3, I corrected automatically. "What?" 3 years of marriage. 5 years together. I shrugged. "If we're being precise about what I'm throwing away—" His jaw tightened. "This isn't you, Anne. This cold, calculating person. Actually, it is me," I interrupted. "The real me. The one who was always there beneath the accommodating wife who rearranged her life to fit yours." I leaned forward slightly. "You just never bothered to look." "And Martin has?" He shot back, a new edge in his voice. "That's what this is about, isn't it? You and my brother. I hadn't expected him to make that connection so quickly. Victoria must have told him about seeing Martin and me together, or perhaps Howard had mentioned something. Martin and I have become friends, I said carefully. Marcus's laugh was ugly. Friends. Right. He stood abruptly. Does he know you're using him to get back at me? That's your style now, isn't it? Cold. Strategic. Unlike the warm, authentic way you used my sister, I raised an eyebrow. At least Martin and I are honest with each other. What's that supposed to mean? Figure it out, I suggested, moving toward the door to indicate our conversation was ending. You're always telling people how smart you are. He didn't move. Dad's sick. I know. He's rewriting the will. I know that too. Marcus studied me, realization dawning. Jesus, Anne. How long have you been planning this? I opened the door. Goodbye, Marcus. He walked slowly toward the exit, stopping just before crossing the threshold. Whatever you think you're doing with Martin, it won't work, he said quietly. Blood is blood. When it comes down to it, he'll choose family. The way you did? I asked. Something flashed in his eyes, not remorse or shame, but fear. Real fear. For the first time, Marcus was seeing the full picture, understanding that he wasn't dealing with a wounded ex seeking emotional closure, but a strategic opponent who had been maneuvering pieces while he believed he was still playing a different game entirely. This isn't over, he warned. I smiled, genuinely amused. No, it's just beginning. After he left, I called Martin. Marcus knows something's happening between us. Be prepared for him to approach you. Already happened, Martin replied. He called an hour ago, wanting to grab a beer and catch up. And I agreed. Tomorrow night. I could hear the smile in Martin's voice. Might as well let him make his case before we drop the bomb. The family gathering was set for Saturday evening at Howard and Eleanor's estate, a sprawling property that had been in the Wilcox family for generations. The official purpose was for Howard to share news of his diagnosis and outline succession plans for the family business. Our purpose was decidedly different. Martin and I arrived separately as planned. I had been invited independently by Howard, a detail that clearly surprised Eleanor, judging by her expression when I arrived. Marcus was already there, watching me with narrow eyes as I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. Anne, Eleanor greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. I'm so glad you could come, though I must admit I was surprised Howard included you, given circumstances. Howard and I have been working on a foundation project, I explained smoothly. He's been very supportive during this difficult time. Eleanor nodded sympathetically. Family is family, even through rough patches. Marcus has been absolutely devastated. Her words cut off abruptly as she spotted something over my shoulder, her expression shifting to confusion. I turned to see Martin entering, making his way directly toward us with purposeful strides. Mother. He greeted Eleanor with a kiss before turning to me. The look we exchanged communicated everything. It was time. I offered my hand, which he took, raising it briefly to his lips. A small gesture, but unmistakable in its meaning. From across the room, I felt Marcus go still, his attention locked on us. Eleanor's eyes darted between us, comprehension dawning. Martin, what? Perhaps we should find our seats, he suggested gently. I believe Dad is ready to begin. The next hour unfolded according to Howard's carefully orchestrated plan. His blunt announcement of his diagnosis, the business succession details, the family legacy considerations. Throughout, I sat between Martin and an elderly aunt, acutely aware of Marcus's burning gaze from the opposite side of the long dining table. When the formal portion concluded, Howard raised his glass for a final toast. To family, he said simply, in all its complex forms. As conversations resumed around us, Martin squeezed my hand beneath the table, our signal. We stood together, moving to stand beside Howard's chair at the head of the table. Martin cleared his throat loudly, gaining the room's attention. While we're all gathered, Anne and I have an announcement of our own. The room quieted instantly, all eyes turning toward us. Marcus half rose from his seat, expression thunderous. Anne and I are getting married, Martin stated clearly, his arm slipping around my waist. We've filed the necessary paperwork, and the ceremony will be small, given the circumstances, but we wanted the family to hear it from us directly. The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. A cousin knocked over a wine glass. And Marcus looked as though he'd been struck. This is a joke, he said finally, voice strained. Tell me this is some sick joke. It's not, I replied evenly, leaning slightly into Martin's side. We've grown quite close these past months. While I was fighting to save our marriage, Marcus's voice rose, control slipping. While I was in therapy? Following your lead? Believing we had a chance? That would be during the same months you were sleeping with my sister, I pointed out mildly. Interesting definition of fighting to save our marriage, gasps around the table. Eleanor's eyes widened in horror. Howard remained impassive, watching the scene unfold with calculating eyes. Marcus turned to his brother, desperation edging into his voice. Martin, think about what you're doing. I have, Martin replied calmly. Thoroughly. She's using you to get back at me. Perhaps initially, Martin conceded with remarkable composure. But life has a funny way of revealing what we actually need versus what we think we want. He looked down at me, a softness in his expression that wasn't entirely for show. Sometimes the right person has been there all along. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, rattling crystal and china. This is bullshit! All of it. He turned to Howard. Dad, you can't possibly approve of this betrayal. Howard had been silent throughout the exchange, his expression giving nothing away. Now all eyes turned to him. The patriarch's response would set the tone for the family's reaction. Slowly, deliberately, Howard raised his glass toward Martin and me. Congratulations, he said simply. I look forward to the wedding. The moment crystallized exactly as I'd anticipated, Howard choosing the son who honored his values over the son who repeatedly flouted them. The public endorsement was clear. Martin was the future of the Wilcox legacy. Marcus was not. Marcus stared at his father, naked shock giving way to comprehension. This wasn't just about me or Martin. This was the final judgment on years of disappointments, the culmination of a lifetime of comparisons in which he had ultimately been found wanting. You planned this, he said, voice hollow as he looked between Howard and Martin. Both of you. Marcus, Eleanor began, reaching for her younger son. He jerked away from her touch. Don't. His eyes locked with mine. Was any of it real? Any moment of the last 6 months? Or was it all just setting me up for this? For a brief instant, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered the 8 months he'd spent with my sister while I planned our anniversary, the years of financial deception. The other women, about as real as our marriage, I replied softly. Marcus looked around the table, at the faces of relatives who were carefully avoiding his gaze, at his mother's distress, at his father's impassive judgment. Whatever he saw there made a decision for him. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the heavy front door slamming behind him with devastating finality. Eleanor made to follow him, but Howard stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. Let him go, he said quietly. He needs to understand the consequences of his choices. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of awkward conversations and forced normalcy. Martin and I played our parts perfectly, the newly engaged couple, appropriately subdued given the circumstances but clearly united. By the time we left, the family narrative had already begun to reshape itself. Poor Anne, betrayed so cruelly, finding comfort and eventual love with the good brother. A redemption story everyone could embrace, especially when the alternative was acknowledging the uglier truth of calculated revenge. In the car, Martin finally relaxed, loosening his tie with a long exhale. That went exactly as planned, he observed, a hint of wonder in his voice. Howard's endorsement was the key, I agreed. Without that, we'd have been fighting an uphill battle with the rest of the family. What happens now? Martin asked, glancing over at me. I looked out at the darkened landscape passing by, feeling an unfamiliar lightness. The weight I'd been carrying since that Tuesday afternoon was finally lifting. Now we follow through, I said simply. All of it. The wedding? I turned to study his profile in the dim light. The man who had become my closest ally, my unexpected champion. Perhaps eventually something more. Especially the wedding, I confirmed. But first, I think we should pay a visit to your father's lawyers tomorrow. Make sure everything is properly documented. Martin's smile was slow and satisfied. I believe that can be arranged. As we drove through the night, I felt the future reshaping itself around us. The revenge I'd planned had evolved into something more complex, more sustainable than simple destruction. This was reconstruction, a new beginning built on the ashes of betrayal. Marcus had unwittingly given me the perfect title for this chapter of my life. You cheated on me with my sister, so I married your brother and cut you out of the will. Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the most obvious ones, hiding in plain sight all along, like Martin himself had been. The lawyers confirmed what we already knew. Howard's new will left everything to Martin, with specific language ensuring Marcus couldn't contest it. The official reason cited was demonstrated pattern of financial irresponsibility and personal conduct unbecoming of the Wilcox name. Legal speak for you screwed up one too many times, kid. Martin and I were married 3 weeks later in a private ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, where I'd first gotten to know Eleanor over hybrid roses. Only immediate family attended, which meant Marcus and Victoria were conspicuously absent. Howard insisted on walking me down the aisle despite his weakening condition, a symbolic passing of the torch that wasn't lost on anyone present. "You're good for this family," he told me quietly as we waited for our cue. "Better than we deserve, perhaps." "I'm not doing this for the family, Howard," I replied honestly. He nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "That's precisely why it works." The ceremony itself was brief, the vows traditional, with one significant addition Martin had suggested: to choose each other, deliberately and without reservation, every day. A pointed reference to the choices that had brought us here, and the ones we would continue to make. Our honeymoon was a working trip to London, where Martin introduced me to the international partners of Wilcox Investments as his wife and the new chief strategy officer of the firm's expanding consulting division. My business expertise folded seamlessly into the family enterprise, my client roster doubling within months. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. My career, which Marcus had subtly undermined for years, now flourishing under the same family name that had once constrained it. Victoria moved to Seattle as promised. She sent a wedding gift, a crystal vase from our mother's collection that she knew I'd always admired. No note, just the vase, carefully packed to prevent breaking. Message received. Some fractures might eventually heal, even if the pieces never quite fit together the same way again. Marcus disappeared for 6 months after the wedding. Rumors placed him in the Cayman Islands, then Monaco, then Dubai, tracing a map of playground destinations for the wealthy and irresponsible. When he finally resurfaced, it was with a new girlfriend, Russian, model-esque, half his age, and a consulting position at a rival firm that seemed suspiciously eager to gain access to what they assumed was his insider knowledge of Wilcox strategies. They were disappointed. Martin had been thorough in removing Marcus from all meaningful information channels months before our coup. Whatever intelligence Marcus thought he possessed was outdated or deliberately misleading. Howard's decline was faster than predicted. 4 months after our wedding, he was moved to hospice care. 3 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was exactly as he would have wanted: dignified, brief, focused on legacy rather than loss. Marcus attended, standing apart from the family, sobered by grief or circumstance or both. We nodded to each other across the open grave. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of a shared loss that transcended our personal war. He approached me at the reception, careful to wait until Martin was deep in conversation with a business associate. "So this is how it ends," he said quietly, looking around at what was now officially Martin's house, Martin's company, Martin's life. The life that might have been his. "Not ends," I corrected. "Continues, just without you as the protagonist." He studied me with new eyes, as if truly seeing me for the first time. "You never needed my money, did you? All those years I thought I was the provider, the successful one." "I never needed your money," I confirmed. "I needed your respect, your fidelity, your partnership." I shrugged slightly. "I found them elsewhere, with my brother." The bitterness hadn't quite left his voice, but it was tempered with something like resignation. "With myself first," I replied. "Martin was a bonus I hadn't anticipated." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for—" "I know." I cut him off, not needing or wanting his catalog of regrets. They were his to carry, not mine to absolve. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Are you happy, Anne? Really happy? Or is this all still part of the revenge?" I considered lying, crafting some response designed to twist the knife one last time, but I found I no longer needed that satisfaction. "It started as revenge," I admitted, "but it's become something else, something real." Before he could respond, I felt Martin's hand at the small of my back, warm and steady. "Everything all right here?" he asked, the question directed at me rather than his brother. "Everything's fine," I assured him. Marcus was just leaving. Marcus held out his hand to his brother, a peace offering of sorts. "Congratulations on everything, Martin. The company's in good hands." Martin hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. Take care of yourself. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was closure of a kind, and that was enough. Later that night, as Martin and I prepared for bed in what was now our master suite in the Wilcox family home, he watched me with thoughtful eyes. "Any regrets?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I considered the question seriously, reviewing the winding path that had led me here. The betrayal, the pain, the cold, calculating months of planning, the unexpected warmth that had grown between Martin and me, something neither of us had fully predicted in our strategic alliance. "Just one," I said finally, his eyebrow raised in question. "I wish I'd seen you sooner." I moved toward him, resting my hands on his chest. "Really seen you." His smile was soft, understanding. "We got here eventually. That's what matters." That night I dreamed of chess pieces moving across a board, white and black blurring together until they created something new, something neither one nor the other, but something stronger in the blend. When I woke, Martin's arm was wrapped securely around my waist, his breathing steady against my back. This wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the happily ever after I'd once believed in. It was complicated, built on a foundation of pain and calculation, and the strange alchemy of revenge transformed into something almost like love. But it was mine, chosen deliberately, with clear eyes and full awareness of exactly how we'd arrived here. "You cheated on me with my sister, so I married your brother and cut you out of the will." The perfect poetic justice. But the true victory wasn't in what I took from Marcus. It was in what I found for myself, the strength I'd always possessed but never fully claimed, the partner who saw that strength and valued it, the life reconstructed on my terms rather than anyone else's. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you actually needed all along. And sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply living well, in their house, with their name, running their company, and sleeping soundly beside the better brother every single night.